Thank you so much. Good to see so many faces. I know it's Friday morning on the last day of Ignite, so really appreciate all of you making the time. So my name is Satish Thomas. I'm the Corporate Vice President on our Microsoft Industry Clouds efforts on the engineering side. And we're super excited to talk to you today about all the work that we're doing around sovereignty, and specifically some of the product work that we're doing around the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty and how that can help you meet all of your sovereignty needs as well. So with that, let's switch to the next one here. So the game plan for today's session is, the first one is, probably nothing earth-shattering for this group, which is, why sovereignty in the cloud and why this topic is very much top of mind for many of you, for us. The second one is the product truth, the work that we've done around the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty, what we've done so far, and also what's coming ahead. And then the third one is, around the vision, which is, we're really rethinking the sovereignty space to say, great, we have all of this stuff, how you apply those landing zones, but how can you apply AI to make this even easier to deploy those use cases, stay current, and continue to innovate on that journey? So just to level set, when we talk about data sovereignty, it's essentially, data residency within region boundaries at the limit, and more specifically and more importantly, how to ensure that you have full control of who has access to that data. And this is super critical, especially in the case of government and public sector use cases. So that's, when we talk about it, across the presentation. So this is kind of that general definition that we go by. And here's where it all starts and ends. So everything that you saw this week around the innovation around, AI, data, business processes, security, and everything, customers want more of it, especially in the public sector space and government space. I think, in my mind, the world changed in January, where all the conversations before that were typically a different set of conversations. But after January, even with public sector and government customers across the world, it was sort of like, how do I get all that AI innovation for my citizen services use case and everything else that's going on in the space? How do you become, how do you stay agile, flexible, get those rapid updates, foster innovation? So you saw all that work around, data, AI, everything you heard in the keynote. How can you take all of that innovation and apply that in the context of government and public sector use case? So this is very much like top of mind. So in all the customer meetings we sit in, this is typically what pops up as what customers are looking for. The third thing is, of course, the threat landscape is changing very quickly and expanding, unfortunately. So this is where one of the things that's very much top of mind for customers is how do they stay abreast of all of these the threats, and how do they have access to all the latest cybersecurity technology and what we can provide there. And then finally, the pace of innovation. I think this is where, of course, as a company, we've also gone through a huge transition in how quickly we bring this innovation to market. I still remember back in January, we were talking about what's the vision, some of this Copilot stuff, and we had some nice videos there. And then boom, in March, we had that in preview, and boom, in November, some of that Copilot work is live. So similarly, every organization, and especially in the public sector and government space, we're seeing just a different mindset on how they can accelerate all of this innovation for the furtherance of their citizens and more. Now, if all of that was possible with one big red or green button, pick your color, that would have been easy, but it's challenging. There's a lot of things that our customers struggle with, especially in this space, as they want to do all of the things that I mentioned previously. The first is complicated legislative and regulatory requirements. And think about all the various combinations and permutations across the world. And it's not just the existing ones. There's changes coming up, and there's more getting added all the time as well. So the challenges is like, how do you stay abreast of what's there? How do you make sure your environments conform to that, and how do you stay updated to that? The second thing is, I mentioned this earlier, the security threat landscape is unlike we've seen any time before, and it is getting more and more intense there. So a lot of our customers like, hey, we would love to do all of that, but how do we stay protected, and how do we make sure that our most sensitive data stays protected in the context of all that? And then the last thing is uncertainty about ensuring digital sovereignty. Depending on the type of the use case, it could probably go all the way from military grade use cases to a public library system, card system. So how do you make sure that you understand what are those different levels of requirements that you actually need to conform to, and what are those offerings that we can give you to meet the various needs of those various use cases? So challenges as well, but then that's where we fundamentally believe the Microsoft Cloud can help. And this is where I always pause when I say Microsoft Cloud for sovereignty, because it's essentially how do we take all the assets we have across planet scale infrastructure, be it Azure, collaboration in Teams, low code, no code, and Power Platform, business applications in Dynamics 365, security, AI, data, all of that in the furtherance of sovereign transformation for each of your use cases. So that's where the team, the engineering team that I have the privilege to be part of, is pretty much sitting at the center of all of this. So we take everything that's there in the Microsoft Cloud, we build additional aspects specific to the sovereign space, but the angle is always how do we build on top of all of these great assets, leverage those capabilities, tailor it, build additional capabilities into those things in the furtherance of meeting these sovereign needs. So this is where we are very excited with the phase of the product that we're at, but we're very, very excited to partner with each one of you as we enter this next wave of sovereign transformation, and the pace is going to be unlike anything we've seen. And this is not just the traditional every year things are getting faster. This year feels very, very different. And it's very exciting. This is my excited face. Before we get into all of that, the other piece I'll say is, you might have heard about all these various efforts, industry efforts that we're working on as a company, which is things like the Microsoft Cloud for healthcare, Microsoft Cloud for financial services, Microsoft Cloud for sustainability. So Microsoft is building these industry clouds. Again, it's about enabling our cloud for partners and, wherever applicable, tailoring our horizontal assets, like retail, financial services, manufacturing, et cetera, and cross-industry efforts like sovereignty and sustainability. So all of this is built out of the same team. It's interoperable, and this is very, very important, because when we talk to government and public sector customers, they're not applying all of this Microsoft, sovereign controls just for fun. They want to enable those healthcare scenarios, those public sector, citizen services, financial services, sustainability use cases on top of this Microsoft Cloud for sovereignty projection. So this is where I think the layering is very important. It's the Microsoft Cloud. You've got these sovereign controls that we can apply using all the capabilities we have with the Microsoft Cloud for sovereignty. But most importantly, all of that is in the furtherance of meeting those use cases that are most relevant for your users, right? So that's where I just want to kind of share how all of these things layer. And our newest baby in all of this is the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty. So we're super excited to have brought this to public preview. The team has been feverishly working on this to get it to public preview a few months ago. And now the team is even more feverishly working on getting this to GA in December. And that's about a month away, if I have my math right. And we're super, super excited. So this is, Satya talked about in his keynote. Satya also talked about in the earnings report a couple of weeks ago. So you can see here that this is very top of mind for us as a company, but more importantly, because that's something that we hear a lot from our customers and our partners. Now, even though we've just been in public preview, the demand has been off the charts. And this is where, it's not one of those things where we work with millions of customers. We work with, a lot of partners that enable thousands of customers in front. So really excited about all the traction, collaboration that we're getting with partners such as Accenture, Atia, G42 in the Middle East, InSpark, Leonardo. But you'll notice there's a ... because there's many more here. And my hope is, as you learn about everything that we're doing here, that in the next session we have on this, we have your logo, your partner logo, your customer logo here as well. So with that, I'll hand off to my colleague, Jared and Miriam, to share more of what's under the hood for the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty.
Don't steal that, though. Thank you much. All right, I'm realizing I got to hold the coffee and the clicker in two different hands here. All right, so let's get started on this. I had originally 140 slides to share with you. They told me I had to do a couple less, so you're going to get the quick version of this. But I wanted to start with what's our strategy? Where are we coming from? How did we get here? So we've been in the sovereignty business for about a decade now, building our first sovereign clouds in the United States for US government needs. In China, you've probably heard of a cloud that we built there, et cetera. We've also looked at solutions like Edge products, the Azure Stack product line, et cetera. And what we've realized as we've worked on these products is that there tends to be a trade-off between the value our customers gain in a public cloud and the controls that they put in place. And so when I say the value they gain, what I mean is all of the cloud value. So if you look at the things over on the left hand of the slide over here, the scalability that you get in the public cloud, innovation. Think about all of the things you've seen at this conference, all of the AI, all of the cool stuff. All of that is coming first and sometimes only to public cloud environments. These are things people are trying to get a hold of. Cybersecurity is another great one. The public cloud has now become effectively the gold standard of cybersecurity. And at Microsoft, 8,500 people wake up every morning to keep our public cloud safe, leveraging 65 trillion signals to do so. And there's a bunch of great talks on that that you can go and, I guess, watch at this point in time now. But there's a lot of great ones you can go and see on this space. The struggle is that as we applied more and more controls to our public cloud and created these solutions that sit in the bottom right-hand corner here, we effectively lost all of that value. Our cybersecurity team couldn't see what was happening, so they couldn't go and do things to make it better. Our innovation was lagging. Parity is an issue. If you've ever leveraged any of these environments, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They're really painful. And frankly, I got sent on a lot of apology tours for these environments to say, oh, like, how can we make these better? And what we realized is that was the wrong approach. Going and creating private clouds or these like islands of data in every single country just wasn't the right approach. So instead we said, how can we take the public cloud, the hyperscale cloud, the thing that we have, and how can we make that thing more and more sovereign without giving up any of those hyperscale benefits? So what can we do? What controls can we create? What technologies can we invest in? What's the computer science at its core that we can go and use to make this better? And that's been our strategy. How do we do this thing in the top right corner? How do we take it and put as many controls as possible? So we looked at that and we said, okay, well, how are we going to put all this together? This is really complicated. Turns out everything from lawyers have to be involved to various bits of technology to underlying, like literally changing CPUs in data centers. And what we realized is that the Microsoft Cloud for X model, or Microsoft Cloud for Industry model, was an awesome one. We can look at it and we can combine all of these capabilities all in one umbrella of a product that we're calling the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty. So let me walk you through what that looks like. Again, I'm going to cover this about 3 different times throughout this talk, so if you don't get it the first time through, you get it a couple more times as I talk through it. So Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty. I call this our wedding cake slide, and this is effectively the buildup of all the capabilities that we put together. So let's start at the bottom layer. The bottom layer here is that this is built on the public cloud. And I'm going to say this a few more times, but this is not a separate building, not a separate data center. There's no cages. There's no like special section, special citizenship. There's none of that. This is just our public cloud. This is just our hyperscale environment. And because of that, you have all of the capabilities that are inherent in that hyperscale cloud. All the things you see in every other one of these sessions are available here. Which is a big moment, and I promise I'll get to the rest of it, which I'm sure is very important in your minds. So from there, we went and said, okay, what else do we need to do? And the first thing we heard from customers is you need to be more and more transparent. Our customers have a great deal of insight into what they do in their environments, but they wanted more. What can they see into our environments, our operations? What are we actually doing? And so what we did is we worked to say, okay, how can we do that? So the first thing we did is we invested in a program called the Government Security Program. This is a way for customers to review our source code. They can actually come into transparency centers and review what we're doing. And for some of our most critical infrastructure, they can even cryptographically assure that the code they are running matches the code they're actually reviewing. There's a fingerprint here that will prevent us from making changes that you are not aware of. And so we're really excited about that, and some of our attestation services and key management services are onboarding to that today. As we work up the stack from source code levels, then you get into what are Microsoft operators doing? And can I have visibility into what those operators are doing in my environment? And I'll show you an example of one of those reports in a minute. And finally, we look to our audit space. We already are compliant with over 100 audits today. Trust me, these 300 data centers get audited a lot. But we are more than willing to work with public sectors and governments around the world to either share the results of those audits or do additional audits where required. And so this is more compliance and transparency than we have ever done in the past. And we're really excited to keep going as far as we can here without infringing into the rights of any other customer. So we went and added all of that, and kind of the next bit of feedback we got was, okay, great, I know what Microsoft's doing. Then they said, okay, so how do I configure this environment so that it's operating in a sovereign way? And it turns out, surprise, surprise, it's complicated. So how do you use managed HSMs and key vaults and confidential computing and all these great technologies? So what we said is, okay, well, we should have an opinion on this, right? We should look at it and go, what is the best way? What is Microsoft's opinion on the best way to configure the Microsoft Cloud for sovereignty? And so we went through and created a set of infrastructure as code, policy as code, templates, landing zones, and automation around deploying that. Now, I'll be the first to say that no two countries are the same here. Kind of ingrained in the idea of sovereignty is the idea that every country is unique and has its own view on how it should interpret those laws and regulations. So we think this gets you about 80% of the way. So you can say this is Microsoft's point of view on the best way to do it. And then there's this extra 20% where we're working with individual countries and some of the partners that Satish mentioned earlier to say, okay, well, what about Italy and ACN? How do we meet that? What about Netherlands and BO? How do we meet that? What about official sensitive in the UK? What about, and this list goes on forever, right? Every country that you are all from, you can probably think about a certain regulation that's specific to your country that we need to meet. And we're developing those as policy packs on top of what we have. And I'll go a little deeper into what those involve in a few slides. Last but not least is the sovereign control portfolio. And I see this as the cherry on top because these are a set of optional components that you can use to do hardware enforcement of confidentiality and sovereignty on top of all of this. These are things like confidential computing. You'll hear me mention this a bunch of times. It's a really cool new technology. I'll talk about it in a few minutes if you haven't heard about it. And there's, I think, 8 total confidential computing sessions here, so there's certainly a bunch of other ones you can go to as well. But it also includes things like managed HSMs, confidential ledgers, customer lockbox, a bunch of other cool technologies. So this all together, when you bring all of these things together, built on the public cloud, compliance and transparency, guardrails and guidance, and the control portfolio, form the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty and our approach to sovereignty at Microsoft. Now, I'm going to go one level deeper to this, and this is more to the architecture-friendly audience in the group, right? If the last one's a bit marketing, this is a little more architecture. Same things. Public cloud capabilities, again, this is in every single region in the world. Something I forgot to mention but came out in the discussion yesterday that I felt like was a really important to add. This has no cost. There's no cost for the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty. We spent a lot of time fighting for that. We're really excited to offer it this way. Obviously, there's underlying consumption costs of things like Azure and Office, et cetera. But there's no cost to the capabilities we're providing here. There you go, from the marketing guy who had to fight for that for a while for me. So then we move up. Again, compliance and transparency. I'll talk about the transparency logs into Microsoft Operator Actions a little bit more. Government security program for eligible governments enables them to review our source code, and we see governments around the world already in this today. And they give us tons of great feedback as well on various things that they find along the way. And then the right to audit and bringing that to all of our customers. As we move up, again, the sovereign guardrails and guidance. These are reference architectures, sample code, these policy initiatives, these landing zones. We're going to show you a demo of what these look like in just a moment. And last but not least, again, the sovereign control portfolio. Really, I could add more boxes to this, and we're working on some documentation out there. We have an MS Learn site already, and I'll give you some links at the end so you can go and read up more on these. But if you see sessions on any of these spaces, they're probably worth your time. If you're coming to this session, you probably will care about those as well. All right, so I'm going to go into a few of these boxes, about half of them I've got one-sliders on, so we're going to go through those over the next 10 minutes or so here, and then I'll turn it over to some fun demos. So let's start at the bottom, and I'm going to work my way up for those of you who can remember the intense architecture slide. So we're going to start with transparency logs. So what's cool here is we've always had this internally. Obviously, it's very important for us to know what our engineers are doing. It turns out when you're a 200,000 person company operating 300 data centers. And so our engineers, anytime they need to access a production environment, they elevate their permissions. They use a JIT program. They have to say, somebody has to pull them in and say, there's an issue you're here to solve. They have to get manager approval. Somebody else has to look at it. They have to have a reason. They have to have a time frame, all of those types of things. That's how we keep our environments internally safe. But we've never been able to give customers access to those logs until now. And so now in preview, we're really excited about it. I actually have a couple of the engineers in the room who worked on this. Now you can sign up for our preview, and again, for eligible customers, you can see the access logs that happen. Access logs that happen. When a Microsoft engineer touches any piece of infrastructure that's related to your tenant or subscriptions. So this is a really cool capability. We're really excited for some of the things that we can do here. I will say it's proven to be a pretty boring report for most customers right now because they pull it up and there's 0 records in it. I think of the 6 customers in our private preview today, not one has a log yet. So we're excited that maybe you guys can help that problem for us, but we don't do many accesses and we hope that that's actually a good thing for you. So that's the first transparency logs feature. Now, let's go to the infrastructure. We're going to have a test on this later, so look really close. And I promise I have a better version. You don't want a picture of this. It's just to prove how terrible it is. It takes a lot of work to set up these sovereign environments. And so we wanted to make it easier. And so the team here is invested in automation and how we can make this something you can just deploy. So we're going to do a quick demo of what that looks like. We're going to do 2 things in the demo. First, we're going to configure a couple of parameters in a JSON file, and then we're just going to run the deployment script. This is all available in GitHub right now, so you can go and take a look at it. And we're going to run through real quick with Miriam what it actually looks like. Somewhat nicely, this is a very easy demo. So here's the parameters file. You can see there's a bunch of different things you need to tell us. These are things like, what is your prefix? What do you want your management groups to be named? By the way, what countries do you want to allow residency into? So these are data center regions. So if you are in, let's say I see UK South, so if you want to stay in the UK, you would just put those as your allowed regions. So you configure a few parameters for what you want to do, and then you move to doing a deployment. So you configure this, you save, you come over here, you want to run one PowerShell script, you want to run one line, and this goes through and starts the deployment process. Now, most customers will take this as a starter point. They'll move it in, they'll put it into their CI/CD pipelines, et cetera. You'll customize it for whatever you're trying to do. But we think this gives you a big heads up. If you're a public sector customer who's in a private data center today and trying to figure out how to do this, this is a great way to get started. Now, we're going to watch this for the next hour and a half while it deploys, and I think you're going to think this demo is great. No, we're not going to do that, but we're going to go instead, and I'll show you what it's actually deploying under the hood. So I'm going to move to show you what's getting deployed here. All right, so this is a management group hierarchy. So management groups are these things that are used to help group subscriptions in Azure effectively. So you can go, you can set up these management groups, and they help you apply policy and rules to certain groupings of capabilities, subscriptions. And so this is what we set up. If you're familiar with CAF and WAF and some of those fun acronyms, this complies with all those. If you don't know what those are, it's fine. This is great. You should look at what we have here. So the first thing is the platform group. Now, platform has management, connectivity, identity. These are things like the management group will have your log analytics because you want to have data on what's happening in your environment. That's somewhat important. Your connectivity sets up your firewall and how connectivity works between these various groupings. If you can imagine, Corp is a internal set of subscriptions, things that don't get out to the internet. Online does for your websites, et cetera. And the connectivity area is what governs the connectivity between those. Then you move to the actual application landing zones over here. You'll see that there's 4. Really, we don't deploy anything in these. These are for you. You drop your subscriptions into these, and we maintain certain rules. So if you need to use confidential computing, which we'll get into in a minute, you would use a confidential landing zone. If you need to do something that's an online website, you'd use an online landing zone. You can also tweak these. You can make them what you need to be. I've talked to a bunch of big multinational companies, and they set these up country by country. So here's one for the UK, here's one for France, here's one for Italy, here's one for the UAE. And they can set the different policies and policy packs in each of those regions. This is all online, so you can actually read it. I know you're not going to be able to read it here today, but all of our documentation has this on there as well. So this is what's actually getting deployed under the hood while we're waiting. Now we're going to do a little cooking show style here. and go and look at what it actually looks like when it's deployed in Azure. So if we head back to the demo here, you'll see that this is an actual Azure portal. So you can see here's the management groups. There you go, here's the platform one. Now subscriptions sit under these, and policy is applied against them. So the policy initiatives, the things that say you can only keep your data in the UK, you need to use customer managed keys, not platform managed keys, that sort of stuff, all is targeted at management groups. Then you take your subscriptions and you put them under the management groups so that they have those policies deployed. And then therefore, when somebody in one of your teams decides to try to deploy a VM that's outside of your region that you want to be in, it will prevent you from doing that or produce a report to you that those things have happened. So this is the environment that actually gets deployed at the end of the day. And this is our best practice. This is our point of view on the best way to implement sovereignty within Azure. Okay, now let's head into a couple of other fun things. So the first one is policy initiatives and how those work. So this is the infrastructure. Now let's talk a bit about the policy and how that works. I see policy as a pyramid of sorts. You really need to think about policy in a set of groupings. So I like to start at the very bottom of that pyramid, which is the actual security baseline. Clearly, if you're not secure, you're not going to be sovereign. We have no desire to reinvent what secure means. There are a ton of great definitions out there. You should use those. Pick your favorite. We use the Azure security baseline. You can use whatever you want here that sets some core security parameters. On top of that, you should go and leverage our confidential baseline, or I'm sorry, sovereign baseline. So you should use our sovereign baseline on top of that to set things like which region you want to be in, again, using customer platform keys, et cetera, sovereignty specific things. On top of that, now you're building into a policy initiative that is for your country. So things like BO for the Netherlands, ACN for Italy. Pick your country, pick your policy initiative. There's a bunch of them that are already out there, and we're building more every day and working with partners who are building them for their regions. So that hits your individual region specific. Then you move into a customer specific one. This one's for you and the specific things that you need to do for your agency, company, business, whatever you potentially have. So that's kind of the build up and how I think about how policy works in the Azure ecosystem. By the way, literally every slide here has a 1-hour talk somewhere else at the conference that you can get more detail. I give each of these like 60 seconds of attention. There's so much more in every one of these spaces. Okay, in the policy initiative space, there's a ton of great assets that come with these. When we build them for a country, we tend to deliver these 4 assets. First is a policy initiative. It's just a JSON file that says, here's the policy, here's how it's implemented. Second is we include a copy of the regulatory framework. So whatever it is that we're trying to meet, we include a copy so you can see what we were reading when we decided what to do. Third is we do a control mapping. So we map, here's what the rule says. It says you must be in the UK, and here's the policy that restricts you to just the UK. So you can see that mapping. And then last is a set of documentation around why we made certain decisions that we made. So that's how the policy portfolio works, and we're pretty excited about bringing all of this to you, and we hope it'll really speed up your time to value in some of these spaces so that you don't have to restart all of this in what we call the spreadsheets of doom that get to start most customer implementations in this space. Okay, I'm going to tell you about one last technology, and it's confidential computing. I've mentioned it about 8 times so far in this presentation. It is such a cool and pivotal piece of technology for us. So effectively, customers have always felt that their data at rest and in transit is safe. If you take your data, you put it on a hard drive, you lock it with a key, and you hold that key, you can give your hard drive to almost anybody, and you feel pretty good that your data is safe because you have the key. It's encrypted. Encryption works. The vast majority of the world believes that. But as customers have moved into data in use, that's where they start to get a little antsy about it. Where exactly is the VM that's opening that data? And when I'm doing something with it, who has access to that VM? What could they do? Or even worse, what could Microsoft be compelled to do in a particular region? Or what if somebody took over a data center? What could they do if they got into that data center? And these are the things that hold governments back from leveraging cloud. And so confidential computing was an aha moment for us. It lets our customers actually encrypt everything that happens between the application and the actual CPU that's doing the processing. And what that means is that the operator, Microsoft, us, who runs the hypervisor, who runs the operating system, who runs the firmware, all of those components, all we see is encrypted memory. So if somebody were to take a dump of the machine from the actual host OS, they wouldn't see anything. Not that it's possible to even do that in our data centers for a lot of really good reasons, which we'll leave aside. There's pundits that believe that that might be, and if it was, confidential computing would make it so that we couldn't do anything there. And this was an aha moment for us. Wait, if we, Microsoft, don't have access to your data in use, in transit, or at rest, then we're out of your trust chain. You don't need to care what the citizenship of our people are or where we're doing anything, because we don't have access to your data. Even if compelled, we can't get to it. And this is awesome for us. And so we've taken confidential computing and started saying, okay, how do we use this across the board? Let's put this into all of our most critical infrastructure. Our managed HSMs all run on confidential compute. Some of our most critical systems and some of our more IaaS and PaaS sort of systems all are starting to run more and more on this. And it's available for you to use today. There are solutions out there. If you've looked at this in the past, you had to rewrite your code. It was a pain in the butt. Today now, and they just announced, you've got confidential containers out there you can go and use. You've got confidential VMs where all you have to do is pick a new VM type, and even better, they also recently announced same price. So for the same thing, same price, you can use a confidential VM as opposed to a regular VM and get all of these great protections. And again, this was huge for us. And we see the world as a place where in the next 10 years, we'll be at a place where you'll wonder why you ever did computing in the open. And so that's our technology we're really, really excited about. So, like I said, I've gone through a bunch of these. Obviously, we couldn't get through all of them, and they told me I have to get off the stage. I can't do 140 slides. So we're going to stop here for a moment and show you what's actually coming next with the Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty. And Miriam's got some awesome demos to show you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jared. Okay, so in the next few minutes, I'll spend walking you through some of our vision through a series of demos, including how we're starting to leverage AI. So you've heard from Satish and Jared that we are heavily investing in sovereignty, sovereign guardrails, transparency logs, as well as policy initiatives and more. You've also seen how provisioning a sovereign environment can be really complex, and that we've taken steps to actually simplify it by providing infrastructure as code with sovereign landing zones that our customers can take and deploy it as a foundation actually to their workload. Today, we are taking that even farther, and we are excited to share with you a low-code and no-code way of actually creating and maintaining your sovereign landing zones with the new Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty experiences in the Azure portal. Let's take a look how a cloud architect would actually use this portal to create sovereign landing zones, deploying them, and managing them. This solution, by the way, really reduces, simplifies the complexity to manage sovereign landing zones, but it also increases your deployment consistency as well as reliability. All right, let's take a look at. So the first thing is to create a sovereign landing zone configuration. And to do that, we have actually simplified this very tedious process. And without writing a single line of code, you can simply go through a series of steps, providing information, creating management group, or actually using the management group, the sovereign landing zones that Jared showed earlier. You can update that to suit actually your needs. And then you can assign policy initiatives right here. Like, for example, setting data residency to make sure that your data stays within a specific region. But also you can select specific regulatory frameworks like NIST. But also, you can find the local policy initiatives, like the BioCloud team for the Netherlands. And so you can assign all the policy initiatives that you need right from here. Once you create, you'll get your landing zone configuration. So I have one ready right here. And you can assess it, view it, review it, edit it. For example, you can take a look at all the management groups that you've set, including the policies. And once you are ready, you can actually right here generate code. We're starting with providing you bicep code generation, and we're going to work with other formats as well. But you can generate it and download it, so you can integrate it as part of your continuous deployment or continuous integration pipelines. Now, after actually beyond just creating landing zones and generating code, you can also register your existing environments that are actually running and then associate them with the configuration, so your desired configuration according to your compliance needs. To do that, you simply create a, oh, sorry, did I go to generate code? Sorry. Okay, but anyway, I have here, you see as an example, my landing zones that I've registered and the actual running environments in Azure. So this will help you to have a consistent view across all your environments, as well as potentially do assessments across drifts that are happening between your desired configuration as well as the running environment. In addition, using in the same portal, you will have access to all the policy portfolio information, like also all the supported policy initiatives, like the bio cloud team from Netherlands. You cannot see it right there, it's hidden, but also there's ACN for Italy, and as we make others available, you'll find them right here. Jared talked about transparency logs as well, and so in the same portal, you'll be able to onboard and request access to these transparency logs for transparency needs. Finally, you can also find information about government security program, and we'll make all the capabilities that we're working on as well as part of the same experience. So I'm pretty sure some of you might be asking now, okay, I've created landing zones, I have running environments, but I really need to actually assess the drifts that are happening between my environment, the actual running environment that could have been modified for some reason, and actually the desired initial configuration. So to do that, we've just created and developed this tool to enable you to do that, which is the Drift Analyzer tool, and this tool allows our customers to identify any change that happened, whether they were intentional or not, by monitoring against core parts of the configuration file. Like, for example, you saw the management groups or the policy initiatives, assignments, and parameters. It could be allowed locations and more. To do that, you simply select your management group or your environment, and select your landing zone configuration, which actually shows your desired state, hit Analyze, and then this view will give me a category of drifts that are happening in my environment, along with severity, description, and specific findings that actually help you to pinpoint the issue. In my case, in my example, you can see there were management groups that were added after my initial configuration. There were management groups that were removed, as well as I have policies that were added and maybe policies that were removed. Specifically, you can see the severity. There's different severity levels also indicated for that. For example, if I needed data residence in a specific region and I removed that, probably that's a high severity, but this allows me to remediate if that was intentional versus not. In addition, partners and customers can actually consume this analysis as part of their tooling that they're already using. So for both the Azure Portal Experience Cloud for Sovereignty, as well as the Drift Analyzer tool, it will be available in private preview soon, so stay tuned. Okay. Now, obviously, all of this, what we're showing you, like we're simplifying this really to an extent where anybody can focus on their actual workloads rather than spending a lot of time trying to set the actual sovereign environments. But for a lot of our government customers, public sector customers, we know that before they actually start to onboard or to create landing zones or manage or deploying them, they spend a lot of time to actually try to find the right information to assess against their needs, regulatory needs. So we are starting to leverage large language models to actually expedite our customers' journey to explore how Microsoft Cloud actually meets their requirements. So we are showing you this Sovereignty AI Assistant that's powered by large language models and Azure OpenAI that provides a conversational access to our customers to be able to ask questions such as, how can my data stay resident in a region? or any other question that you have, and the assistant will actually provide the right information for you. So let's take a look through maybe how an information security architect would use that, and how the AI assistant will actually help the architect in this case. To begin with, I might be interested to see what's Microsoft's position on digital sovereignty. Obviously, we've heard a lot about that in this session and in previous sessions. The AI assistant will provide all the relevant information, summarized, with relevant links to sources and references that I can take a look at further to assess actually the answer and maybe deep dive into the topic. The assistant will also provide me follow-up questions, potential follow-up questions that allows me to deep dive into that topic. But let's say I might be interested, hey, how do I ensure my data actually stays resident in my region? Because that might be one of my regulatory requirements. We hear that a lot. So I'll get the specific answers and pointers in a similar way. I might also be interested to understand transparency, or how to get visibility and control over cloud providers' administrative access. And you can see that it provides a very full answer in a sense that you can use Azure Confidential Computing, the transparency logs, as well as the government security program that you've heard throughout the presentation. So you'll be able to find actually all this information right here. Finally, I might be interested to learn about Microsoft Cloud for Sovereignty and the capability that it provides. So the assistant will be able to help you with that information as well. And then I could deep dive using this to specific capabilities. For example, what are sovereign landing zones and how I will get started. So we hope that using this assistant will actually get you to the right information that you need in a short amount of time. In a matter of a minute, I was able to actually get bits of information that I needed that I could actually deep dive. And this will help me to get started using all the tooling and capability that we showed you earlier. So with that, so we are all transforming with AI, right? Now we've shown you how we are starting actually with the sovereignty assistant to help you accelerate your journey. But AI can also go farther. It can help cloud architects, guiding them to the next steps of building and managing compliant and secure environment. Probably you've all seen that there were announcements as well as part of the Copilot families, the Azure Copilot. So with that Azure Copilot as well, with the experiences in the Azure portal, you'll be able to leverage all the Copilot experiences. And finally, but not last, our partners and customers can also take advantage, obviously, of this AI innovation in the hyperscale cloud to build your own AI-powered applications, leveraging large language models, and use Cloud for Sovereignty actually to ensure you're meeting your sovereignty requirements. With that, Jared.
Thank you. All right, only 130 slides. No, we are at the end of our session here today, so thank you so much for coming. A couple of last-minute things that I'd leave you with. We're really excited about the future and where we're going and some of the things we can build. Things that don't just help you make this easier, help you go into GitHub, but also bring this to everybody so that you can focus on really building your workloads. We're working on taking this further and further through the Microsoft stack as well. As you can see, most of our investments are in Azure today, but we're continuing to work across the entirety of the Microsoft cloud. I'd encourage you to go get started today. Go to AKMS/sovereignty. If you go here, you'll get to our blog. On that blog, there's a bunch of links. Our GitHub's out there, links to how to join these programs, join our private previews, all that sort of fun stuff. We'd love for you to get started. This is ready to go. The vast majority of the code here is in GA state, and we're winning customers in markets around the world where they're starting to go and think this way. To some of the things Satish showed in the beginning, we've got successes in places like Italy, UAE, the Netherlands, the UK, Australia, all sorts of places. And we'd love to work more with you. So please come give this a shot. Give us your feedback. We'd love to hear more. And thanks for coming today, and especially on a Friday morning at 9 a.m. Thank you.